very important, and that's the evil in America. Now, notice I didn't say America is evil, but there is something very pervasive that is unseemly in this country as well as elsewhere, and I'd like to discuss some things about that. You may not agree with me, and that's fine, or you may agree with me. I do think something needs to be done, something needs to be addressed. We do need positive change, and positive change can be forthcoming. The difficulty is that a lot of people want change, but they want to dismantle many things. And hey, first off, let me say I am no fan of government, but I'm not a fan of no government. I'm not a fan of a bad government. If we're going to have government, which it seems the world has come to terms with, then we need the best possible government. And in the United States, we don't have leaders. The Constitution, to my knowledge, never says that we elect leaders. We elect representatives. We represent those people who are supposed to have our interests in their heart, not set agendas that profit them or make them more powerful or keep them in office forever while dismantling the services and the goods and the needs and the necessities that the people seek, but sadly oftentimes don't get. So with that said, I hope that you listen and pay attention and understand where this is coming from. There's things going on in the news right now, and I want to address one of them. And again, I want to be very, very sensitive. It's tragedy. It's tragic. It's horrible for the family and for the people involved. But that's a submarine. So this will date this video, but that's the submarine that's lost at sea. Again, it's very, very horrible, very, very sad. People's lives most likely are already gone or will be. It doesn't look like they're going to be able to rescue them. One of the things that I hate about the press, the media, the politicians today, or anyone talking is what about someone else, or what aboutism? I'm going to engage in that a little bit today. And so I'm forewarning you. Okay, I understand I'm doing it, and I'm doing it for a reason that I hope you will understand. The circumstance in the North Pacific, or where the Titanic was lost and where the submarine, the submersive, seems to be lost, again, is a tragedy. It turns out that someone I know knows one of the people on board, I don't want to make light of this. I don't even know that it's appropriate to speak of it because there are family and friends who are losing a family member or a friend. But understand this. These were wealthy people who had every right to expect that they would take a trip and return, but that there were risks. There are always risks. But they could afford to go on this excursion. And unfortunately and tragically, something happened and they may not return. And that's a terrible thing. And yet, and to some degree, rightly so, because it's an anomaly. It's not something that happens every day. The news media is obsessed that there are 5 people caught under sea in a submersible on their way to the Titanic that has disappeared, and they may not be found, and they may perish. And believe me, I've said it now a number of times. It is sad, it's unfortunate, it's tragic, and I don't in any way make light of that or the loss that people suffer. But during the 4 days or so that they've been gone, how many people were killed by gunfire in this country? People who expected to return home to their family but didn't. How many people got shot, killed, intentionally or otherwise? How many people during that same time period died because they didn't get adequate medical care? They were refused because they didn't have insurance or the right amount of money. They couldn't afford it. They couldn't pay for it. They were turned away, or they died because of a medical mishap, intentional or otherwise. How many people couldn't afford some medication that's important to them? because the costs are just too high? How many people couldn't go to the grocery store and buy food because the costs are too high? How many people died in automobile accidents? You know, we've become numb to some of the things and some of the concerns that happen all around us because they happen a lot. You know, the number of gun deaths in the United States is extreme. Doesn't happen anywhere else in the world, and yet people will defend the right for people to bear their arms so that they can shoot or protect, because it's based on a fear that government might come and take away your guns, or that they might prey on you, or that they might overthrow you or overtake you. And while that could be the case, we saw it in Germany, and it does appear to be happening in the United States to some degree, while they're banning books, banning liberties, restricting rights, removing medical health needs from people, rewriting history, you know, and by the way, this isn't red or blue. This is a systemic problem that's at issue in the hearts of some people in this country. And while I say that, there is a blind allegiance to the cult of personality, you know, the chasing of a shiny object, a person, a messiah-like figure, flawed, very flawed, criminal, maybe treasonous, maybe a traitor, maybe, you know, I mean, all sorts of things. There is this blind allegiance to not principles and practices that could save us, but to people, personalities, like celebrities, you know. And so think about this for a moment. There are those who want to get rid of the FBI and the police and the DOJ and all of that. And I say this, look, I'm going to tell you some things about me I'm not going to elaborate on, but I've been at gunpoint at least a half of a dozen times in my life, both by police and by criminals. It's never made me want to get a gun or have a gun or own a gun or use a gun to shoot someone else. I don't feel the need. Perhaps the need could arise, but I don't feel the need, okay? I've been with bad cops, and I've been with good cops. I don't want all cops to be defunded or removed. I don't want all FBI agents to be defunded or removed. I don't want all the laws to be defunded or removed. And yet I am not a fan of laws. I'm not a fan of government. I told you that before. But nobody wants a bad cop, and God knows there's tons of them, right? But there's also good cops. And when you need a cop, you want a good cop to show up, not a bad cop to show up. That's what we want. You want a good FBI agent to show up, not a bad FBI agent. You want to get a good judge, not a bad judge, or a corrupt Supreme Court justice, or somebody in your locale. You want honest people of integrity who do their jobs well and who serve the people because they've either been elected or appointed or hired to do that. You want to believe in them. You want to believe that slogan, to protect and serve, applies to you and me. So I'm not a fan of doing away with everything, and I'm not a fan with supporting everything. You know, I mean, it has to be where we think about things and discuss things and have rational discourse instead of screaming and yelling and lying and obfuscating and disinforming and misinforming and leading people astray, so that we can maintain party power or political power or profit power or personal power. There are good, responsible corporations in this world, and there are really bad, non-responsible corporations in this world who are doing great damage to our food supply, our farming, our air, our water, access to goods, access to medicine, the cost of medicines, the cost of procedures. I mean, the cost of medicine and medical care and access to medical care in the United States is almost unheard of. I mean, it's almost criminal, and yet it's everyday common practice. It's a thing that we've grown to accustom of, but it's also why people are leaving states and why people are leaving the country, because they know that it can be better, and it is better maybe elsewhere, and they want to seek that out. That's my dog, and she's having a good time. We're at it. Anyway, the point is, we need solutions, not more fighting. We need positive answers and remedies to situations that are crucial. They're critical to us. We need to get along in harmony and cooperate and collaborate and not fight. You know, at one time we used to think that our government was a body of people in three different branches that work together independently to elevate the people of this country. But, you know, there's been this 40, 50, 60 year, actually it's happened since the beginning of the Constitution that the forefathers warned us about, is beware the rise of the corporation. We've made corporations people. We've given them power to spend and to donate and to contribute to campaigns. Politicians are bought off, they're lobbied, they're paid for, they're bought. I mean, they get a salary in Congress, but they come in and a few years later they're multimillionaires. That should be of concern. There are people in Congress who are being censored or harmed or hurt or politically, demoted or insulted, while others who should be aren't. You know, and it's because there's this them against us mentality, or we'll do whatever we have to crush you. This at one time, whether you like it or agree with it or not, there was a civility in Congress, which frankly, it bothered me, because you knew that behind the scenes they were calling each other names, but in public they were going, was the honorable person from the state of such and such, and so there was a decorum. It was like Robert's rules of procedure, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it needs to be done behind the scenes as well as in front of the cameras or in front of the public or and now there's not even that. There's name calling. There's people jumping up and yelling you're a liar. There's people lying. We have Congress people who are in office who are convicted or indicted, for crimes and criminals, are known liars, known essentially frauds, and they're not being removed. So there. I mean, we're allowing, for power reasons or party reasons or political reasons, we're allowing less than glorious elements in our system, and it's harming the system and it's harming us, and we're losing faith in the system, and the system isn't serving us. The system does serve those people at the top who get millions and billions and billions and trillions of dollars, and corporations, when the fact of the matter is that the people who make those people rich are the average workers. Whether they're unionized or not, the average person who puts in their 9 to 5 or their 5-day work week or whatever it may be, and all their overtime, is the reason why a CEO is rich. Granted, there's some tech stuff and some hedge fund stuff and all that, but the bottom line is, if your workers don't show up, which we saw in COVID, the corporations panic. The airlines, well, we're not going to be able to do this if our baggage handlers and our pilots and our flight attendants and our ticket agents don't show up. And yet, they don't get paid the way they should get paid. They don't get the retirement benefit. I mean, these retirement benefits, the perks, the medicine, the health care, all, by the way, is being removed in most cases. And if you're not working, you can't get health care. Well, that's what Medicaid is for. That's what Medicare is for. That's what Social Security is for. And yet they're cutting that. They want to remove that. They want to stop that, because those are entitlements to poor people who are lazy and sitting on their couches and who don't want to work, which is just BS. It's disinformation. And while there may be some of those, this is true, there's a lot of corporate swine at the top who don't want to work either, who've made their money and now just want to hoard more money and have more jets and more cars and more homes and more things so that they can show off that they're the richest person on the planet. And you know what? It's harming everybody else. It's harming the people here in the United States. It's harming the people around the world. Greed and the thirst for power over everything that we hold dear, every concept that we think or deem as good and valuable. And it's predatory capitalism, and you can be afraid of socialism, and you can hate capitalism, and you can be worried about communism, whatever. But the point is, what we're doing isn't working for everybody, and this is supposed to be a government that justice is blind and it's equally distributed among the poor, the colored, the non-colored, the male, the female, however you gender it. I mean, it's not supposed to make a judgment on that, and yet our justice system is tiered. The wealthy can afford, good defense. It doesn't mean they'll get one, but they can afford one, while the poor people can't. And so we have public defenders to help those people. They're not the, I mean, there may be some really incredible public defenders, don't get me wrong, but they're not top tier. They're not the highly paid. They're not the people who, the multimillionaires are turning to when they need something criminal or civil. So justice is not blind, and justice is not equally distributed for all, nor is medical care. If you can't afford it, yes, you may go to a hospital and they can't turn you away, but you can be swamped with medical debt beyond belief. And they're wanting to get rid of college debt, or, and I'm not opposed to that. But get rid of the medical debt, or get rid of the credit card debt. The credit card companies have done everything they can to get the average citizen in debt. Why? Because they make money. Who? The banks make money. Who? The hedge fund managers make money. Who? There's somebody who's in it for profit, and it's preying on the people who don't have profit and don't have power and don't have a say in what they do. And so the Fed does this, or the government does that, or the Supreme Court does this, or the Congress does that, or the Senator does that, or the President does this. Yeah, inflation is coming down, and it hasn't come down far enough. Gas is still expensive. Food is still expensive. Hopefully that will change, but it may not. And it's a hardship for all sorts of people who on their daily level couldn't afford to do some of the things that other people can. And they're dying needlessly in some cases. Some are being killed intentionally in some cases by people who shouldn't have access to guns or weapons. It's not a single issue. It's a systemic issue. It's what's in the hearts of us, what's in our minds. If it's them against us, there will always be a problem. If we extend our hands and try and cross the aisle or cross the river or cross the border or cross the fence in the backyard and make a friend and a neighbor and go, we're all in this together. We're all Americans, or we're all, from England, or we're all Spanish, or we're all Asian, or we're all just citizens of the planet. This notion of borders is silly. There's no borders. Animals never had borders. When humans came along and we went from tiny little groups of people to bands and tribes, and then ultimately civilization, the rise of civilization, we created these silly concepts. Here's a line drawn in the sand. We own this, you own that. You can't cross here, I won't cross there. And we invade each other for resources or for political reasons, and not even so much for resources, it is for ideology nowadays. I don't like the way you're thinking, so I'm going to do something about it. It's amazing. It's not just one person, it's many people. And it's not just the people, it's what's in their hearts. It's how they've been indoctrinated from the churches, good and bad, right and wrong, the temples, the mosques, the politics, the schools, the education from their parents. It's not one thing. You don't want them getting rid of books. You want books to stand the test of time. Why? Because someone's read them before you. If you take them away, you can't whitewash history. You can't erase it. You think you can. But it's there. But sadly, we can ignore it. Remember the old saying, if you don't learn from history, it repeats itself? We can very much find that history will and does repeat itself if you take away the books, if you take away the history, if you try and whitewash things and say they didn't happen. Because it did happen. And what we need to do is learn from it and become more compassionate, more caring, more kind, more loving, more accepting, more tolerant, instead of less so. I know, immigrants are coming in, and some can come legally and some can't, and by golly, there should be a wall, and there should be... listen to ourselves, for crying out loud. Are you really going to shoot your neighbor if he comes looking for food when everything is gone? Because you want the last cookie before you perish? You really want to overthrow the government and install a worse government? Look, it's about reform. Reform should be slow in some cases so that it can't be taken over in a coup, right? It can't immediately change hands. That's what you're hoping to prevent. At the same time, it should be rapid enough that things actually change during a lifetime so that people can enjoy the lifetime. Because after all, why are we here? We're here to live. We're here to love. We're here to have relationships and have children who are the future of our planet, and to take care of the planet, not ruin it, and then go, well, I'm rich enough, I can go blast out into space and live on Mars. I mean, come on, people. Right? It's the thinking that is evil that is within us. And by that, I don't mean satanic. I mean, it's corrupted. It's wrong. Our premises, our propositions are wrong. And we need to return to principles and practices that promote positivity and optimism and health and well-being and care and compassion for all. You know, it says, Jesus said, if you do this to the least of these, you do this for me. Well, how has that gotten forgotten in the churches? I mean, the churches will say, we're going to legislate sin. No, Jesus didn't say, hey, go to Rome, go to the empire, go to the people in charge, the political people, and tell them that these are sins and they should be outlawed. Who got into this notion that legislating morality, preventing another person from seeking medical care, or the right to life, to make a decent living, and the very fact that we have to make a living should tell us something. We didn't do that at one time. Yes, we hunted and gathered, and then ended up becoming an agricultural society, and then an industrialized society, now an information-based society, and we put out lots and 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 lots of information that's just wrong. And people believe it, they digest it, they believe it, and then they become religious zealots about it, and they band together with hate groups and fear-mongering groups and political groups and church groups. And the rise of that hate and the rise of that hurt and the rise of that anger and the rise of that fear is not a good thing. What is a good thing is that we're able to begin to notice it. I tell a story in my programs and my workshops and my books and things that I used to make tea in Los Angeles when I was a younger man, and my kettle was broken and the whistle didn't blow. So I would put the water on and I'd go back, sit in the living room, and I'd hear the noise of the water, and I'd run in there waiting to make my tea and find out that the water was very noisy, but the water hadn't boiled yet. And so I would wait until the water boiled, and I would pour my tea. Excuse my shaky hand, I would pour my tea. It took me a long time. Maybe a year before I realized that water is the noisiest before it boils. I mean, think about everything. When it's being heated, you're adding energy to the water. The atoms, the molecules, all being agitated. There's energy being there, and they're bouncing against each other, and they get loud. And at 2007, 2008, 2009, they're loud. 2010, 2011, they're loud. At 2012 is when water boils. And when it boils, what happens is it releases steam, and it slows down into a rolling boil and gets quiet. There's a transformation that occurs, and it quiets back down. So after about a year, I learned that when the water's noisy, I can just stay there, and then in a moment, it's going to quiet down, and that's when the water's boiling. I go in and I pour my tea. So what's going on right now in the world is it's very noisy. Energy is being added to hate, to intolerance, to restriction, to prevent people from being who they are, what they could be. They're taking their rights away, taking their money away. More people are in poverty in the U.S., and our poverty in the U.S. is far better than poverty elsewhere, by the way. But there's more people in poverty in the U.S. than there are rich people in the U.S. and worldwide, right? There's more problems in terms of access to resources like food and healthcare and welfare when needed, and Social Security and all of the things that we call entitlements, because we're entitled to them. We were granted them through our government, through our Constitution. Now they want to take them away because all the money keeps getting taxed and moving to the top, and the lower people get a bigger tax burden. But they're not only getting a bigger tax burden than the big corporations and oligarchs at the top, they pay more in everyday expenses. Just like when George Bush, the president, went into the supermarket and was surprised by the scanner, didn't know what it was, because he didn't shop in supermarkets. That was a campaigning guy, but in his life, he's a silver spooner. He's never been in a supermarket. They're buying the best foods and buying the best linens and buying the best china and buying the best cars and buying the, and all that kind of stuff. You become president, you're driving around and you're chauffeured, and you got, they don't know, they're out of touch. These politicians are out of touch. Some of them, yes, come from noble or less than noble beginnings, and yet many of them, look at who's become lifetime politicians and become multimillionaires as a result. Not from their salary, obviously. And not necessarily just from legitimate investments. By that I don't mean corrupt investments, but they've been paid. They've paid off. There's a trade-off in influence. Hey, it's a quid pro quo, right? Scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Here, I'll give you a donation for your campaign so you can remain in office, and you vote my way. I mean, I don't want to be cynical, but be skeptical and yet be open to be proven wrong, but also be open to be proven correct. So there's lots of grievances in the world and in the United States, and we can solve them. The point of transformation may be coming, and we hope it's not a violent confrontation, but the point is there's lots of noise right now, and that noise is waking people up. The young people are getting involved in politics and voting, which scares some parties, because the young people don't want to get killed in school. They don't want to get killed in the malls. They don't want to get killed on the streets. They don't want to get killed in the churches. They don't want to get killed in their homes by family members or strangers or friends or classmates. So people are waking up and understanding that, by golly, we need to do something to preserve life on this planet, whether it's 4 years old or 40 years old. We need to take care of our own. The reason for laws was not to restrict people. The reason for laws essentially was to protect people. And there are lots of useless and insane laws that don't protect anyone. They just restrict your rights. Well, you can't read anything anymore because it's so filled with attorneyese that you can't understand it, because attorneys have taken over. They're in politics. Many of the politicians are attorneys. They create laws. And then there are politicians who've never crafted a law, and that's their job. And they've been there 10 years, and they've never written a single law. They don't do anything but suck up salary and complain or whine or bitch or moan or prescribe or restrict or whatever they're doing. And this is the problem with our country. We need to have reform and get rid of the politicians, legally, of course, but to get rid of the politicians who are obstructive and dangerous, and get good ones. How you do that, we'll have to put our heads together and figure that out. We need a better caliber of person who wants to get into political office. We need better caliber of people who want to be educators and be church leaders and be parents. We need responsible people who are willing to go the extra mile, to have, as Napoleon Hill would say, a pleasing personality, and want to add value to others so that the others benefit. When you help another person, you get to feel good, and they can reciprocate. If you slam somebody, they're not going to want to help you. They're going to want to slam you back. And as long as you're being slammed, as long as their rights are being eroded, as long as their money's being taken out of their pocket, as long as they can't have health care access, as long as they're suffering, they will always be noisy. They will always be turbulent. They will always be against you. You go, why are the criminals, the street? Why are there riots? Why is there looting? They're looting because they don't have any of that stuff. They can't get that stuff any other way. And then people in their own are killed in the streets in front of them, sometimes deliberately, as we've seen with, say, like George Floyd, sometimes by shooting violence or mob violence or whatever. The answer is not, let's just shoot the protesters, let's just shoot the looters. The question is, let's make society a place where everybody feels so much good that they don't feel like looting or hurting or harming other people. You understand that when people are fat and warm and happy, they don't cause problems. When they're comfortable, they don't leave their comfort zones. And the issue is that some people are extremely comfortable and some people are extremely uncomfortable. So I'm going to wrap this up, but I started with the idea that, and sadly, again, the tragedy of the submersible that's now by the Titanic, that those people could afford to take the risk to go to try and see the Titanic, and they may have lost their lives. In fact, we can assume that they have. And that's a tragedy for all. But during the time that they've been gone, the 4 days from Sunday to today, how many countless numbers of people have been killed, shot, died, prevented from having medical care, died while in a hospital because they couldn't get the care that they need, or died at home because they couldn't get the care they need, or couldn't get the medicine that they need, or starved to death, or died because it was too hot and they didn't have air conditioning, or too cold they didn't have heat. How many people are not able to get to work or get a job and they want to work, but they cannot get a job for whatever reason? There are those, you know. And sure, there are some that don't want to work. But the point is that privilege pays for lots of stuff and poverty can't pay for anything. And if all you want is rich and poor, it's because the rich can always control all of the poor then. Now think about that one for a second. And we know this is true from blue bloods on. Those who feel privileged, those who feel I'm born with royal blood or whatever, go, they are different than me. They're different than me. They are not my kind. They don't deserve my good kindness. They don't deserve what I have. I'm entitled. They are not. They are the wannabes and I am the have. But you know what? The haves need to understand we're not trying to take what you have away from you. We're trying to have the same as you. Not by taking it away. But if you've got $200 billion and someone took $190 billion away, you still have $10 billion. $10 billion. You have purchase power that most people do not have. But if you have $100,000 and you take $90,000 away, you only got $10,000. $10,000 isn't enough to live on for a couple of months for most people. It's not because they're lavish and they're buying TVs and cars. It's because they have to buy food. They have to take Ubers or buses or trains to work. They have to get babysitters or healthcare, you know, that they don't have. They have to pay for things that come easy for somebody who's got millions and billions of dollars. Now, I'm opposed to raising taxes on people that make $400,000. That's not rich. You may be better off than some. You're not rich. If you got $10 million, $100 million, you're rich. Raise the money, raise the taxes on those people. Let the other people who have $400,000 become the millionaires. Let the people who have $10,000 become a $100,000 person, and then a millionaire, and then a $10 million. Let's help raise these people up. Maybe we have to do job training. Maybe we have to pay a living wage, for crying out loud. What's the minimum wage? 7, where is it? How is it? How long has it been that way? How much is the perks and the benefits and salaries of the congressmen and the senators and the Supreme Court justices and the billionaires and the millionaires and the hedge fund founders and the CEOs of corporate? How much is their hourly pay? Different, right? As long as there's that disparity, as long as there's that injustice, justice is not blind. The financial situation in this country is not fair, it's not kind, it's not blind. The disparity between access is not. That's why I say there's evil in America. The evil is because some people promote that. Willingly, knowingly, deliberately, they want the disparity, they want the downtrodden, and they want to get all the goodness and all the money and all the stuff. I'm not saying take them down. I'm saying let's build the other people up. Let's give access to the people who don't have access. Let's give help to the people who don't have help. If you don't take 190 billion out of your 200 billion and we take 100 billion, you still have $100 billion. For crying out loud, people. Stop being rich hoarders. Stop hoarding money and cash and resources and access to resources and power and let somebody else come in. They call it closing the field in education, where you make the requirements for a degree stiffer than the ones that you had to do so that the people behind you have more obstacles or more that they have to prove in order to get into the same field that you got in a little bit easier. We see that in everyday life. Everybody should be able to take a submarine to the Titanic. If they want to take that risk, every single person on the planet, every single person in America should be able to do it. Not because it costs $5, but because whatever it costs, everybody can afford it. So I ask my politicians, hey, I don't care what side of the aisle you're on, work for the people, for crying out loud. Stop telling me you're working for the people and actually do it. Create some laws and some practices and some procedures and some processes that actually benefit people, lower the cost of living, raise the cost of of minimum wage, but don't make it about minimum wage. Make it about a living wage that everyone can benefit. Get us free health care. Get us free education. Get us what every other civilized country has in this world that we don't. Some have a kind of a pay partial. Some have 100% is covered because it's covered in your taxes. Put our taxes to work. Put our taxes to work. You're all being taxed, some, not everybody, obviously. The highest people in the country don't get taxed their fair share. And so we're suffering, and we could be taxing them a whole lot higher than we could, and yet they would complain and whine and you know what, and they're too big to fail. I mean, come on, people. Come on. It should be fair. If it's fair for them, it should be fair for everyone. What's good for the top should be good for the person that is at the rock bottom, and or the person at the rock bottom. We're not telling the top guy to come down here. We're saying help the guy or gal down there get up to where you're at, and not by taking you down or taking things away. I mean, this is the fear mongering that they do. I mean, the people are willing to vote against their own best interests because people have told them, oh, you know what, your neighbor will then have what you have, or will take your goods, or will come into your house, or whatever. So you got to have your guns, and you got to have this, and you got to have that. George Orwell was right. 1984 is come and gone. We're living in an age of misinformation and disinformation, and we have just egregious lies that are being told that people believe. And it's as silly as the people who drank Kool-Aid, put on their Nike tennis shoes, lied down in their beds, and waited for the spaceship to come and take them to another planet. You see, this is proof you can get people to do anything against their own best interest. We have cults in politics. We have cults in religion. We have cults in economics. We've got cult leaders who are actually getting people to do things against their own interests and against their brothers and sisters and neighbors and family and all that sort of stuff. For their interest, for the cult leader's interest. Never for the cult member. It's for the cult leader. It's like, how come all the cult leaders get all the women or the boys or whatever they want, but nobody else does? It's because they're in it for themselves. They're in it for their own enrichment, self-aggrandizement, for their own power. A lot of people go into politics for that. A lot of people are in politics for that. A lot of people may be Supreme Court justices for that. I mean, we're finding out all sorts of amazing things about all the stuff that's gone wrong. And this is good news. Yes, it's disheartening. Yes, it's egregious. Yes, it's offensive. Yes, there's corruption in politics. There's corruption in America. There is evil in America. There are bad problems in America. But guess what? We're waking up to it. We're beginning to see what's wrong. We're beginning to realize this isn't an isolated incident. This is systemic. It is pervasive, and it needs to be corrected. And we can correct it. But we need to work together, not fight. We need to cooperate and extend a hand, not a sword or a gun. We need to stop name calling and start calling people out to come cooperate, collaborate, to help lift up and edify everyone so we all live a better life. We can do this. I mean, America's only about 220 years old, and we're already like totally screwed, right? But we were at one time a pioneering young country that, even though flawed, we had slave owners and flawed people who were our leaders, you know, although they were supposed to be representatives, but they came and they created a country and a constitution, a Declaration of Independence and a constitution, and united the states all together, all 50 of them eventually, with the idea that we come together, we are united states, not divisive states, not arguing states, not warring states, not fighting states, not succeeding states. You know, we are working together to build something that so that the sum of the parts is the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. We've lost that spirit. We've lost that dedication. I'm not saying it was perfect. It certainly wasn't, and the people who started it weren't perfect, which is good news, because it doesn't mean we have to be perfect in order to make changes. It only means we have to be willing to make changes that actually are good for everyone and not just for a few. Right now, the few are profiting and the many are suffering. We can change that, so let's change that. You and I can do our part. I'm Rex Sikes. You visit me at rexsikes.com, REXSIKES.com. I actually have a PDF. I don't have it available right now. I'll put it in the description. It's called The Battle for Your Heart, Mind, and Soul. I think it's like $9.95, but if you want to get it, it's a part of a series. But it'll talk about these kinds of concepts and things that are going on and the battle that is being waged by politicians and religious people and the media and everyone. And by the way, there are honest and wonderful and incredible journalists. Not every part of the media is fake news. There are wonderful and honest and dedicated, sincere people of integrity who are politicians and church leaders and educators and teachers and policemen and FBI. There are people in all walks of life who are wonderful, good, marvelous people. And then there are those who are otherwise. Let's promote the people who are good and honest and wonderful, and let's allow the people who are otherwise to slip away, move away. Let's remove them from office. Let's remove them from power positions, legally, rightfully, and replace them with the good, with the austere, with the lovely, with the kind, with the compassionate, with the friendly, with the smiling, with the extended helping hand, with the one who says, you know what, you may be a different color, a different gender, a different race, a different nationality, a different political persuasion, but you are my brother, you are my sister. We are all on this planet together. We're on a rock hurtling the sun at 60,000 miles an hour, and we're all in it together, and we're not getting out of it. Oh yeah, maybe the rich will get out on a rocket ship somewhere, but the point is, we're not getting out of it. We're here together. Let's make it together. Let's cooperate together. Let's live together. Let's love together, and let's make things marvelous. I hope this video is saved. This is my first live. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you do, please like it. Subscribe to my channel. There'll be more like this. I told you about the PDF. I have a book called Life on Your Terms. I mean, there's a lot of things, programs, and things that you can choose from. The main thing is to open your heart, heal your heart, and help your heart help other people do the same. All right, and with that, I'm Rex Sikes. I'm going to close this, and I hope it sticks around. This is my first live. I don't know what it does. All right, much love, peace, and blessings.